It is Lockdown Tuesday here at 8 p.m. in Malaysia. I hope that everyone joining from the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, different parts of the world, I hope you guys are enjoying your week. Today, very, very special story. It's called No Way. And what does that mean? Well, we'll find out as we do today's wonderful story. Today's story is going to be about Gideon. So everyone, grab your lattes, grab your bubble teas, your sky juices, whatever it is, and sit back and relax. And we're going to have today another fun time learning Bible stories and understanding how they are fun, and interesting, and also relevant to our very lives right now. All right. So if you guys are ready, let's begin today's Lockdown Tuesday. So today we're going to go over a story, and the story is about a dude named Gideon. Okay? Who's Gideon? I'm going to share with you a little bit of his story. Now, the background of the story is it's a terrible time. Like, basically, Israel is being bullied. Like, crazy bullied. So what happens is, back then, like, farming is like the normal way of getting all your food. They would farm, and when it came to time of harvest, the Midianites would all gather, and they'd just wreck up all the fields. And this was every year. Like, if it only happened like once or twice, you'd be like, oh, no, what do we do? But this was 7 years straight. Every single time the harvest was ready, they would gather their army, destroy everything living, including animals and livestock. So what does that mean? It means that every time the harvest came around, people were freaked out and they were scared. And they said this army, they called them like the nation of grasshoppers or locusts, because there were so many people in the army, it looked like there was locusts all over the ground. So what happens here is people are so afraid that when it came close to harvest time, they would gather as much wheat as they could, and they run up into the mountains and into the caves and hide in holes. Like, that's how scary it was. Now, people are fearing for their lives, and this is happening year after year after year, and 7 years straight, constantly being bullied by the Midianites. Now, the main person in this story is a guy named Gideon. And he's in the book of Judges, and we're going to look at that today. And this guy is no different than anyone else. This guy, too, every harvest, he's hiding in a wine press. And I'll show you a picture of that later. But he's hiding in a wine press, okay? Which means it's a hole dug in the ground, and it's really small and cramped. But here's this guy, afraid for his life, waiting in that wine press, waiting for all the Midianites to pass by and destroy everything. Now, while he's in the wine press, God comes to him and says, hey man, I want you to save Israel. And the thing is, Gideon was like, are you like, seriously? Like, where have you been the last 7 years? And he asked God for sign after sign, are you really God? Are you really going to save people through me? God gives him all the signs that he needs, which is 3 of them. Okay, can you imagine that? He had to ask 3 times. Finally, God uses Gideon, and one time, like, this is the harvest time, all the Midianites are gathered in one area. Like, they're talking about so many soldiers, it was basically covering the land like locusts. And Gideon had 32,000 people in his army, which is not enough. But you know what God says? Too many people. So he sends 22,000 home. He's like, all right, God, I got 10,000. And he's like, no, still too much. Do you know how many people God used? 300. Now, if you guys haven't seen the movie 300, this is like the original 300, okay? 300 people to destroy this entire army without a single death. Now, if you were Gideon and God told you that, you'd be saying what? No way. Like, no way. Right? Even if imagine God coming to you and God coming to Gideon, hiding in a wine press, and he's like, I'm going to use you to destroy the Midianites. What would you say? No way. There's no way. So what eventually happens is he takes the 300 men to surround the entire camp. So it's just like one line of people, 100 people here, 100 people here, 100 people here. You know what they have in their hands? They have a jar, a torch, and a trumpet. Like, you're going to win a battle with those 3 things. And what they do is, first, they smash the jars and they scream, for the Lord and Gideon. And then one torch in their hand and one trumpet in the other, and they all start blowing the trumpets. And what happens is the Midianites freak out. They're like, whoa, what's going on? And they start killing each other. They actually start killing each other. They're frantic. They start killing each other, and they start running away, and then the Israelites defeated the Midianites, and there was peace for like 20 years after that. So go figure, right? This is one of those no-way moments. So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn from this story, the story of Gideon. However, we have to understand that this story, how is it relevant to you? Like, what does it have to do with you? Like, for me, too, like, if it has anything to do with me, the thing I struggle with the most right now, well, among other things, is this lockdown's going for another month, and I can't cut my hair for another month. Like, that's a big struggle for me right now. Like, it looks fine now because I have, like, three handfuls of gel in my hair. But, you know, what's going to happen later is when I take a shower or when I wake up in the morning, you'll see what actually happens. It's nuts. It's crazy. Okay? So we're going to learn today how this story relates to all of us, make it interesting and fun. But I also want you to know is, just like every week, we're using the Bible. Why? It is an ancient book of wisdom. If you want to learn about life, you have to look at a book of life. You're not going to find it in a math book, right? You're not going to go like, so we go to Geometry 102, and in what do you learn in Geometry 102? Well, we're going to learn how to defeat 100,000 enemies. No one does that. Not in math class, right? Academics is academics. To learn about life, we have to read from a book of life, okay? Now, let's go into the story and how it's relevant to you. So the first thing you have to look at is, look at the situation of that time I just told you, and look at our situation right now, right? If you look at Judges chapter 6, verse 2, it's interesting. It says, the power of Midian was so oppressive, right? We're talking like more than China oppressive. Right? It was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain cliffs, caves, and strongholds. That's how bad it was. The Midianites were bullying the Israelites over and over, year after year. And the thing you have to think to yourself is, if you were in that situation, what are you thinking? Like, you think the first year you're going to be like, oh my gosh, well, I hope they don't come this year. Then they come the next year. And you're like, oh, I hope they don't come next. And then they come the next year. And every year they come, what kind of hope do you have that they're not going to come? Eventually it gets to a point you have no hope. You're going to be like, oh, they're going to come back again. And this is kind of what life is. Like, even when you look at this lockdown right now, we think to ourselves, this lockdown, oh, it'll end after a month in Malaysia. Then they extended 2 weeks. We're like, okay, maybe this 2 weeks will be the end. And then they extend it 2 weeks. And we're like, oh, maybe this will be the end. And then what do they just extended it last week for how long? 1 more month, which means we're going to be 3 months in lockdown, right? And for us too now, we're thinking to ourselves is like, it's possible they can go another 2 weeks or maybe another month, depending on what the situation is. You know, in life, there's a lot of times where it always seems like your luck or becoming like more happier, more successful, or getting through a dark situation, it always feels out of reach. Almost to the point there's no hope. And we'll never quite reach there. And what happens, we think to ourselves, it's like, does it ever get any better? Like, is life gonna get any better than this? And that's what life is like too, just like the situation with Gideon. And think about this, with Gideon, there was no way anyone thought that this was going to stop. Why? Because the Midianites were too big. And just like we have issues at work, some of us might be losing our work, issues with our finance, issues with our friends and family, issues with our lovers. We kind of wonder to ourselves, like, do you see the light at the end of the tunnel? But in this situation, the interesting thing is Gideon is called by God. Okay? He's called by God in Judges chapter 6, verse 11. And it's very interesting because the angel of the Lord comes down to where Gideon is. And where does it say Gideon is? Gideon was threshing wheat in a wine press. We're going to show you a picture of what this wine press looks like in those ancient days. The wine press is like that. You see it on the screen, right? It's crazy. He was hiding and it's much deeper than this. He's hiding in a wine press. It's so small, so how much wheat can you actually thresh at that time? Not much. And he's hiding in this wine press. And the interesting thing is, why would God call him? Right? Like, why would you call him? When you look at him, he's not a hero. When you look at him, he's not courageous. He's not brave. He's hiding there too, waiting for the difficulties to pass by. He's fearing for his life. He's not any different than anyone else. And the most interesting thing is, we got to think about ourselves too, is when difficult times comes, a lot of people kind of go into this hole, this wine press, these caves, mountain clefts, hiding from the danger, not wanting to face it, and we just kind of wait for the difficulty to pass, right? Now, let me ask you a question. If I were to say, what would be a perfect picture of like courage or being brave? And the thing in your head you see is like a uniform, someone strong, someone bold, someone like, yes, we can do this. But you got to think about this carefully. Does it, is that what courage really looks like? Does courage look like anything? It's not. Courage is not anyone in like an army uniform, because not all army people are courageous. It's not a doctor, because not all doctors are courageous. You think about a picture in your head of what courageous is, and the last person you think of is yourself. Why? Because we're the ones that usually crawl into a hole in the most darkest times. We crawl into the hole and we fight with our parents, we fight with our friends, we fight with our boss from work, or we get fired from our jobs, or we don't have enough money to pay the bills. All those different things. We're crawling into these little holes, just like Gideon did at that time. But this is the crazy thing. When God calls Gideon, guess what he calls Gideon? Look at Judges chapter 6, verse 12. This is the calling of Gideon. And it's this, it says, the Lord is with you. And what does he call him? Mighty warrior. And you're like, what? Can you imagine if you're hiding in a hole and God's like, hey, mighty warrior? You'd be like, are you talking to me? Like me? Don't you see I'm stuck in a hole and I don't want to come out because I'm scared? But God says, mighty warrior, the Lord is with you. And he's like, what? He's small, he's fearful, he's hiding. And in the same way too, God calls all of us to at these situations, and he calls us mighty warriors. And we're like, we have no idea why you would call us in the first place. Because like I said, if you were to have a picture of bravery, I don't think you would choose yourself at this time. Because if you think about it in your head, what's going on in your head? So the next thing I want to talk about is what's the real issue we're dealing with? What's the real issue? So in this situation, in Judges chapter 6, verse 13, what does it say? Gideon, after God calls him a mighty warrior, Gideon's like, excuse me? He's like, excuse me, Lord? But if you're with us, why has everything like this happened to us? Why has all this happened to us? Where are all your wonders that our ancestors told about when they said, did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. So now we're kind of sitting there like going, oh, where were you? Where were you? And this is kind of the things that we do. We like to blame in those situations. Oh, it's their fault. They said this. And you're like, God's like, hey, it's time to go. And you're like, where were you the last 7 years? Huh? Oh, are you supposed to be almighty? Then where were you in all your wonders? All our ancestors told us how great you were, but where the heck are you? But the interesting thing is, the answer was already given at the beginning of the chapter. And in verse 1, you know what it says? It says, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years, God gave them into the hands of the Midianites, which means that what is the real issue? And I'm going to tell you this I'm not going to tell you this, I'll tell you this in a very nice way. While I have a sip of latte. The nice way is, the issue is you. So here's Gideon like, where were you? But the whole reason that they're in that situation is because they disobeyed God. And if you think about it too, in every situation we're in, there is something we have a responsibility over. And there's always two things. And these two things are whether you did or didn't do. So the first one is what you did. It means in a lot of the situations we're in trouble, it's because you made a mistake. Right? And we know it sometimes. Like, oh no, I made a mistake. How can I face this person? And you go crawl and hide in your hole when you're the one that made the mistake, when you should say sorry, right? And the second thing that happens is sometimes it's not your fault at all. It's 0% your fault, right? It's like your boss accuses you of something that you didn't do. You didn't do it. But your boss is like, how dare you? And he scolds you and he gets mad at you and angry and you haven't done anything. But then, how do you react? It's what you didn't do. You react poorly to that situation. And what you didn't do is, after he scolds you, he calms down, and you go to your boss and say, hey, boss, actually, it wasn't me. Let me just tell you the story that I went through. But what happens is, a lot of people, when they get scolded, they're like, that's no fair. And then they crawl into their hole. They crawl into a hole. Right? And they wait for wait for the entire difficulty to pass by. But it's never going to pass by. Why? Because it'll keep coming back every single year, just like the Midianites. Sometimes it's your fault, sometimes it's not, but then it's about how you react to the situation. Do you crawl and hide in a hole, even when it's not your fault, when you have every right to say no? Sorry, boss, I just want to tell you this. This is what actually happened in that situation. The next thing is, you have to realize that the solution isn't hard. It's not hard. The solution is not hard. If you look in Judges chapter 6, verse 5, says, they came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count them, and their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. So imagine in your mind, what are you thinking how big the situation is? Impossible. Impossible. But you have to realize is, a lot of the problems that we face, they're only big in our heads. We make them much bigger in our heads. And you think to yourself, oh, there needs to be a great solution. We need a savior to come. We need corporate headquarters to come down and solve this thing. So what happens is he gathers 32,000 men, the most he can. And God says, nah, it's a little bit too much. He's like, 10,000? And God's like, nah, it's still a little too much. And God says, 3. Oh, like 3,000? He's like, no. 300? And God's like, yeah, let's go with 300. And what would he say? No way. Oh, no way. You got to be kidding me. There's no way it's going to work. God called him to the most simplest of solutions where there is no death, that none of their men would die, and only 300 men would have to go to this battle with like 100,000 men on their side. It was a zero-death solution. The solution was very simple. It's a simple solution. When we have problems, when we have difficulties, a lot of the time, I'm not talking all of them. The majority of the times, it's about us talking to someone and saying, hey, I felt like this when you said this to me. Hey, I'm sorry. I made the mistake. I shouldn't have said it. I'm sorry. Sometimes it's about prayer. Sometimes it's about just asking them. Sometimes it's about meeting up with them. Sometimes you lose your job. It's just about making a resume, which isn't that hard. The only reason it's hard is because it's in your head, right? It's about going to the interview. It's making a phone call. It's making a text message. It's very simple solutions. However, haven't you guys had that before? When you think you're in big trouble, when you meet them, you're not in trouble at all, but they're there to praise you and encourage you. It's so crazy sometimes, like, oh my gosh, if I knew. Oh, it seems bigger because why? It's because when you're hiding in a hole, you're by yourself, right? And when you're by yourself, how do you think? You're alone, and in your head, think about this. When you're alone in your head and you say bad things about yourself, or bad things about other people, if you're by yourself, who is defending you? And the answer is, no one defends you. So if you say, oh man, Sky, you're terrible. Who's defending me? If I'm by myself, I have no one to defend me. And what happens is we crawl into our holes and we just think negative and terrible thoughts. The situation's never gonna work out. Oh my gosh, I might as well quit my job. Oh no, I might as well get a new mom. Or something like that, I don't know, right? Oh, I might as well get new friends. And we go into these super extreme moments like it's the worst situation ever when it only requires the simplest solution. You see, in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, it says, for the Spirit God gave us does not make us fear. It doesn't make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline, right? Power, love, and self. This is what we are on the inside. You see, why can God call you a mighty warrior? You got to think about that. Why are you a mighty warrior? You're a mighty warrior because you hiding in a hole or you becoming a mighty warrior has nothing to do with the outside. It's got nothing to do with you working out. It's got nothing to do with you exercise, nothing to do with you being healthy. It's all up here. The fear and the mightiness that we have is all up here. Where are you fighting? The fight that we have is not a body fight, because think about this. Is anyone throwing you in a hole? Really? Like when you get into a problem or difficulty, is someone throwing you in a hole? And the answer is no one's throwing you in a hole. So where's the issue? It's either mental or spiritual. It's mental or spiritual. And that's why God can look at you and say, get up, mighty warrior. Because it's all about what you think. It's all about how you perceive yourself. And if you realize that you're strong and you're capable, you're powerful, you're loving, you have self-discipline, you have self-control, this is when the warrior comes out. The warrior or the person hiding, it really depends on what you think of yourself. It really depends on how you perceive yourself and how you hold yourself. Look at Gideon. Spent all of his life for the last 7 years just hiding in a hole, just waiting for the Midianites to pass by. And all of a sudden, he has confidence with 300 men. Why? Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6, it says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." Because he was sure. He had faith in something greater and bigger. And this is why no matter what the situation, he was able to overcome it. He was able to overcome. And you too, you have to realize in your situations that you're going through right now, yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it kills your mind. Yeah, you might get a little bit depressed. You might feel anxious, anxiety, fear, whatever it is. But the only way it changes is up here. That's the battle you fight. It's all up here. It's spiritual and physical. It's spiritual and mental. And these are things that you need to fight mentally and spiritually. And this is a fight that we have to do every day. You guys, we got to stop crawling into these holes and just waiting for these difficult times to pass by. Do you know why? Because just like the Midianites, when they pass by and you did nothing about it, they'll come back next year. And they'll come back again next year. And in our workplace, in our families, or whatever it is, it's going to come back again and again. Not in a year, but when you're in family, it's a family, it's like every time you meet, which might be every month, every 2 months, every 3 months, with your friends even shorter. We have to realize that this is a time that you have to turn the no way, like it's unbelievable, to after seeing Gideon defeat like these 100,000 soldiers with 300 people, and you'd be like, no way, no way. It's the same 2 words, but it's all about where your mind is. The people in the hole say, impossible, no way. And the people with the mighty warrior, what do they say? It's unbelievable. Wow. That's amazing. All right. So I hope you guys really enjoyed today's story of Gideon. And I hope that you guys can take home something today from the Lockdown Tuesday. And this will be a time for all of us. I want to thank all of you. Hey guys, thanks for watching. This is Sky. Make sure you click subscribe, obliterate that like button, leave some comments, and support us on Patreon. All right. Catch you later.